This is the LG 45GX950A-B, which is the world's first 45-inch 5K by 2K resolution monitor. This for me is currently the largest and most expensive monitor that I've reviewed to date, packing in some serious performance and specs. Like all of my monitor reviews though, I'm going to cover the specs first, followed by the in-panel settings, my test results, and what you can do with consoles before getting into what I like, potentially don't like, and the gray area before wrapping the video up. With that being said, let's get into the specs. The LG 45GX950A-B is a 45-inch ultra-wide OLED with a 5K by 2K resolution, an 800R curve, and a 165Hz refresh rate at a 0.03 millisecond gray-to-gray response time. This has a dual mode function and can do 330Hz at 1080p. This has a typical brightness of 275 nits with a peak brightness of 1300 nits in HDR with a 1.5% APL. This has a pixel density of 125 pixels per inch, which for comparison, a 4K 27-inch monitor has a pixel density of 163 ppi, a 32-inch 4K monitor has a pixel density of 138 ppi, and a 34-inch 1440p ultra-wide has a pixel density of 110 ppi. This has a 1.5 1,000,000:1 contrast ratio, true 10-bit color, with display HDR True Black certification from VESA, and covers 98.5% of the DCI-P3 color gamut. For ports, this has one DP 2.1 with UHBR 13.5 and has a bandwidth of 54 gigabytes per second. This has two HDMI 2.1 that are going to run at 48 gigabytes per second for the bandwidth. And with both of these, it's going to utilize display stream compression, so DSC. As far as I can tell, you cannot turn this on or off in the panel menu. I'll talk about that again here in a little bit. You have two USB 3.0 ports, one USB Type-C port that can deliver 90 watts of power. It can be used as a display input, and it's also what you utilize to connect the monitor to your PC, so you can utilize those two USB 3.0 ports. And then you have a 4-pole headphone jack that has DTS Headphone X, which provides incredible sound quality if you connect a headset to the monitor. There is no built-in KVM switch here, but we do have built-in speakers that I'll do a sound test for in a little bit. I wasn't able to find any information on the size of them, but they do get plenty loud, and the sound quality is really good with these. This has AMD FreeSync Premium Pro and is NVIDIA G-Sync compatible. For the physical adjustments, this can raise and lower 120 millimeters. This can swivel to the left and right 10 degrees. This can tilt 10 degrees forwards and 15 degrees backwards. And this isn't listed, but it does have a couple of degrees of pan in either direction. This is VESA compatible with a 100 millimeter by 100 millimeter pattern. If you wanted to mount this, just keep in mind the weight here, as this is 20.7 pounds without the stand. For the panel, this is a matte coating here, not glossy. It only comes in the black color, which isn't necessarily black. It's almost like a super dark gray, but it almost has a little bit of purple in it. It is a unique color here with this. And then we do have the RGB strip on the back. That's really it in terms of branding or any type of changes in the molding. It is very minimal with the look, which I do appreciate. And then inside of the box, you'll get the monitor, arm, base, DP cable, HDMI cable, USB-C to C cable, user manual, and warranty card, which this comes with a 2-year warranty. Which I did want to showcase the power brick compared to a, I guess, normal power brick. So the one on the left is the power brick with this monitor. The one on the right is the one with the 34-inch 1440p 240Hz OLED that they have. And so there is quite a big size difference between this two. It is very beefy, but this also brings me to the size of this monitor, because it's 45 inches, it's massive, but let's compare this to the 34-inch ultra wide that they have. So this was harder to capture with my camera than I thought it was going to be. I don't think this quite does it justice, but hopefully this gives you just a little bit of an idea of the size difference here. But obviously the one in the back is the 45 inch, the one in the front is the 34 inch. It is considerably larger, and it was hard to get them directly next to each other just because of the base. But yeah, if you have these in the room with you, you can tell there is a massive difference obviously between the two, because you're going from 34 all the way to 45. It's just hard to articulate how big 45 inches is with this monitor until you're sitting in front of it and you're like, holy smokes, this is an insane amount of screen real estate. Next, let's do a quick sound test for the speakers. I usually have the camera 3 to 4 feet away. This one is more like 4 or 5 because it is such a large monitor. I had to put it back a little bit further so you could get all of the monitor inside of the camera frame here. And then these get so loud that I only left this at 50% volume, and I'm still going to adjust this in post just a little bit. It gets incredibly loud. This is more just to showcase the richness of the audio that you can get out of the speakers. Shifting over now to the panel menu. The menu button is a single button on the back side of the panel towards the bottom middle. You also have a power button. It's actually on the underneath side of the panel molding on the left hand side. And then to the right of this power button, you will have the audio port. Clicking in the menu button once, you get this quick access menu. For this, in the center you have the main settings. Towards the top you have power off, the bottom you have exit, and then on the left and right you have these quick access options that you can set in the panel menu itself. Now if I don't click this in, I just push to the left and right, that's going to adjust the volume for the monitor. If I click up or down, it will actually bring up the accessibility, and with this it's essentially allowing you to turn on the beep or the buzzer sound that this has with it. For the panel menu main tabs though, you have game adjust, picture adjust, sound, input in general. Notice with this at the top you do have just a quick overview of what current settings you have. So here I have 165 Hertz, I do have adaptive sync on, HDR is off, and then the dynamic action sync is turned off. In order to enable that, you have to have this in the game mode, Gamer 1 or Gamer 2 option, which this is supposed to minimize input lag, allowing for faster and more responsive gaming here. The way it works is it's just minimizing the processing latency and reducing signal latency. I don't have the tools to test this out, unfortunately, but this is a really fast OLED. Between having this on or off, I actually don't notice any difference. Looking at the game adjust tab though, we have game mode, dual mode, adaptive sync, black stabilizer, crosshair, FPS counter, and game reset. Going back to the game mode, this is essentially your picture presets. Here you have personalized, Gamer 1, Gamer 2, FPS, RTS, Vivid, Reader, HDR effect, which tries to mimic the HDR look with SDR. And then you have sRGB, DCI-P3, color weakness, and then calibration 1 and calibration 2. Most of the footage in this is me using calibration 2 because I've used the LG Calibration Studio. Now with this, you do need some type of calibration tool, whether that's like the Spider X with data color or the Display Plus HL from Calibrite. Here I'm using the Spider X. I've calibrated this. It gives you more options than what you get in the panel menu, but again, you do need that tool, and those tools are a little expensive. Those tools typically come with their own software as well, so you don't have to use the LG Calibration Studio, and either the LG Calibration Studio or the software that comes with the color calibration tool that you're going to use, they give you a reminder. You set that, it could be once a week, once every other week, to recalibrate, just to make sure that you are keeping the settings that you're applying to the monitor. But you can kind of go through this and see some of the adjustments that you can make with the software here if you wanted to use it. And then for the dual modes here, if it says off, that will be the higher resolution. If it says on, that will be at 1080p. So we have off full wide, off 16:9 at 37 inches. Essentially, that's going to take this 21:9 aspect ratio, bring it in so you will have the black bars on the side, but it is 4K 165 hertz. Then you have on 21:9 34 inches, 16:9 37, 16:9 27, and then 16:9 at 24. All the ones with on, you can do the 330 hertz, but it is at 1080p. It is not at 1440p or 4K. Now, some of these modes, like the 16:9 aspect ratio at 37 inches, is going to be really good for consoles because you can put it in the aspect ratio that it fits versus trying to force 21:9 where it just stretches out the image. The only thing I'll say about this is the 330 hertz at 1080p is not something I really enjoy. I like the higher resolution here, and I will forego the higher refresh rate. Also, with this, I've heard some issues with accuracy, so I will have a link for a video from Optimum Tech where he talks about this, because with this one, he found it to be far less accurate than the 34-inch version, but this is something that I don't really have the setup to test all of this out. In general, I just don't like trading out resolution for the response time with this, but I know a lot of competitive FPS players might want to do that. Here, watch that video because this may not be the right monitor for you because of this issue with the accuracy that you may deal with. After this, you have the picture adjust tab. Here you will find brightness, peak brightness, contrast, sharpness, gamma, color temperature, RGB color, 6 color, black level, and picture reset. Now, I won't showcase all of the different options that are or aren't available depending on the game mode or the picture preset that you're using, but it is kind of a mixed bag. So if you're using the personalized picture preset, you'll have a lot of this available, but then when we switch over to like FPS, you may notice like sharpness and gamma isn't available. If you're using the calibration 1 and 2, a lot of these won't be available because you're calibrating it through the software, not in the panel itself. If you're looking at some other ones like sRGB mode, you may notice that color temperature isn't available or gamma. Like there's just a lot here when it comes to what is and isn't available depending on the picture preset. I do find that interesting. It may lead to some confusion with the end user that is trying to calibrate this to their liking. So you may have to go through each individual one and then figure out what adjustment you need if you're not going to use, for instance, the calibration software because you don't have that tool. Looking at some of the options that you have for these settings though, for peak brightness, we have high, low, and off. And then for the gamma, you have 4 modes. It doesn't give it to you in the numbers. You're not at like 1.8, 2.0, 2.2, anything like that. It is literally just these modes 1 through 4. And they are kind of different. Like it's almost like they're out of order because some of the latter ones are brighter than the earlier one. So not quite sure what these correlate to, but that's the modes you have. For the color temperatures here, you have custom, warm, medium, cool, and last you have manual, which is interesting because you're going from 0, which would be neutral, all the way up to C10 or W10. There is the steps in between that are giving this a slightly warmer or cooler look to it, but you don't get the Kelvin units with this. So it's not saying like 2200K, it's just giving that C or W and then the number. And then last here, we have the RGB color values that go from 0 to 100% that you can change here if you want to. And then for 6 color, you get the hue and saturation of the RGB color values that you can adjust as well. Next, you have the sound tab. Here you have sound out, DTS headphone X, and volume. For the sound out, you have to choose whether or not this is going to be the internal speakers here or it's going to go through the headphone jack. For DTS headphone X, you have game, entertainment, sports, and off. The volume on this is set to 50% by default. With that sound test, these get incredibly loud. They do have a very rich sound to them. And with the DTS Headphone X, you can actually get really, really good audio through a headphone if you wanted to as well, with all of these profiles having their own unique EQ settings with them. So they do sound different across the board, which I like. It's not like a subtle change. You can tell a really good difference between these. After that, you have the input tab. Here you have input list, aspect ratio, auto input switch, picture by picture / picture in picture size, and then picture in picture position. For input list here, I just want to confirm that you can use the USB Type-C port for a display input. For aspect ratio, you have full wide, original, and just scan. And then the picture by picture / picture in picture is just choosing the mode. Keep in mind, if you're going to use this, for example, with the console, you're taking a 21:9 and splitting it in half. That doesn't equate to two 16:9s like it does with a super ultra wide. So here you will have the black bars on top of the image when it comes to the console. For the picture in picture mode, my camera is having a little bit of a difficult time with making sure that it was in focus with this. You may notice that it does change a little bit here. But we have the 3 sizes, so you can go small, medium, and large with this, and then you can change this to any of the 4 corners on the monitor. And with this, especially with that larger size, it is to me more usable with the console for that. But with the really small size, not usable. But there are going to be a ton of different applications that you can use with this because the screen is so big over a smaller 16:9 aspect ratio monitor. And then last, we have the general tab. Here you will find language, OLED screen move, OLED screen saver, OLED image cleaning, USB-C option, hexagon lighting, user defined key 1 and 2, which are the quick access options that I talked about earlier, smart energy saving, deep sleep mode, automatic standby, input compatibility version, buzzer, OSD lock, screen self-diagnose, sound self-diagnose, information, open source software license. For the OLED care features, we have screen move. Here you have off and then 3 modes. This is going to move the screen slightly at regular intervals to prevent image sticking on the display. Then you have OLED screen saver. Screen is turned off if there is no change on the screen for a set period of time. You can't change the time interval. It just shuts off. It to me seems like at about 10 minutes, but this isn't something that I've actually timed out myself. And then we have OLED image cleaning. This is standard with any OLED. Here, the only thing I want to point out is that it takes about 10 minutes for it to actually do this, compared to other ones that it may be done in about 6. And then we have the USB-C option. With this, you're choosing whether or not this is going to prioritize data or it's going to be used as a display input. If you're choosing to use this for data, this is how you're going to use the extra 2 USB ports on the monitor, because it doesn't have the normal cable that you find with a lot of other monitors where it's an extension cable from the monitor to the PC. It's using the USB Type-C cable as that, but it's also using it as the option for a display input. And then we have the hexagon lighting. Here you have 4 static color presets. Within each of these you have 21 colors to choose from. Then you have cycling, which is just like a color cycle through all of those, or you can turn this off. And then we have the user-defined key 1 and 2. Again, these are the quick access presets that you can choose from in that quick access menu to the left and right. Here you have input, game mode, OLED image cleaning, sound out, DTS Headphone X, picture by picture / picture in picture, crosshair, black stabilizer, FPS counter, and then the hexagon lighting. Last 2 things here, we have the input compatibility version. You can choose from 2.1, 1.4, and 1.2. I'm running a 4080 Super, so I do not have the DP 2.1. If I choose that option, the screen is just blank. I have to choose the 1.4 version. The buzzer here, this makes a noise every time you're clicking the menu button or choosing something in the menu. If you want that turned off, you can do that here. So now that I've covered the specs and the in-panel menu, let's get into my test results, starting with the on-screen response time testing tool. Had some issues with this initially, had to make a handful of adjustments just so that this would work. I think partly because of the screen size here, I was running into some of these issues, but once I nailed down the test, this is an OLED, it's crazy fast. I'm not showing the 0.03 millisecond gray to gray response time with this, but I'm using a different testing tool as well. For the perceived response time with this, we're showing really good results. Outside of a couple here, everything is under 1 millisecond. For the average complete time, it is 1.6 milliseconds. For the 02550, so the black to white to black transition, it was 1.9 milliseconds. If we're looking at the RGB overshoot, we're seeing a couple numbers on there, but that's not anything that's actually translating over to inverse ghosting, which is what this is for. So no inverse ghosting really to speak about. And then for the visual response rating, it's taking the perceived response time, the RGB overshoots, taking those numbers and essentially averaging them out. Here, 93.9 across the board. This is the most uniform I've seen this test with all the monitors that I've reviewed. And so here we're getting a solid A when it comes to this monitor. So here again, it's an OLED, it's incredibly fast. And with my test results, I am showcasing that. Again, I'm not getting the 0.03 milliseconds gray to gray response time, but they're using a different testing tool than I am here. I'm just trying to provide more information. And outside of this, what does it look like when we look at a UFO test? I'm not seeing any inverse ghosting or ghosting. This is an OLED. The picture is crystal clear. Shifting over now to the results from the SpiderX color calibration tool, we have Gamer 1, DCI-P3, and then the sRGB. For Gamer 1, that's just one I picked because if you look at Gamer 2, Vivid, FPS, RTS, they all have the same color gamut coverage. So looking at Gamer 1, we have 100% coverage of the sRGB, 91% of the Adobe RGB, 96% of the DCI-P3, and then 89% of the NTSC. I want to note here that I'm just adding more information to what LG has said they have coverage of, and with their specs, they're saying they have 98.5% coverage of the DCI-P3. I was not able to achieve that through my testing tool and the various modes that this has. So even with DCI-P3 here, it's 100% coverage of the sRGB, 89% of the Adobe RGB, still 96% of the DCI-P3, and then we have 87% of the NTSC. So I'm 2.5% off from what they're claiming they have in terms of coverage with this for the DCI-P3 color gamut. When we look at the sRGB, 100% of the sRGB, 76% of the Adobe RGB, 76% of the DCI-P3, and then 70% of the NTSC. So I'm not hitting the same 98.5% coverage that LG is claiming here. I'm close, but again, I'm not hitting that with my testing tool. And although I suspect that they are using a higher caliber testing tool than I'm using, even with that, I should still show closer to what they're claiming with this. The good news is if you don't need a very specific amount of coverage when it comes to color gamut with any of these, the monitor itself is very vibrant and colorful. These are still good results when it comes to this testing tool. sRGB mode, you usually see that drop off with that. That is going to be more geared towards anything super specific like working in Photoshop or Premiere Pro, like you're a photographer and you need that specific color gamut or color profile in order to do your workflow. Shifting over now to consoles and what you can do with those, starting with the PlayStation 5. Here we have 4K, 1440p, 1080p, and with that you get variable refresh rate across the board along with HDR support. Here you can see the frequencies for HDR and non-HDR or SDR for 4K, and then we have the 1440p here. With 4K you do get more. It's not just the 60 and 120 hertz. You get the 24, the 50, 60, 120. Same for 1080p. The big thing missing here is going to be the auto low latency mode. You do not have that with the PlayStation 5. This is the 21:9 aspect ratio. I do not recommend playing like this for most people. It just stretches out the image because consoles don't natively support the ultra wide aspect ratio. You can change the aspect ratio though to just have the black bars on the side if you wanted to play in this 16:9. So to just showcase this for a second, this is going to be with the image stretched. My camera has a hard time showcasing this because this is now going to be with the 16:9 and it's gonna look like they're almost kind of identical, just this one has the black bars so it's less screen real estate. But in person, you definitely can tell that if you left this in the 21:9 aspect ratio, that the image is stretched. So I would say most people will prefer to do the 16:9 because everything looks more uniform and not stretched. Looking at the Xbox Series X, you're going to have the same settings here. So we have 4K, 1440p, 1080p. This has 720p though, which is going to be different than the PlayStation 5. All of these 60 or 120 hertz. Here, just looking at what you have access to, the only thing you don't get here is going to be the Dolby Vision for gaming. That's a proprietary type of HDR and calibration for that HDR, so that is not going to be with the Xbox Series X. Outside of that, you get everything else. You still don't get the auto low latency mode, but that was the same as the PlayStation 5. You do get variable refresh rate though, which is nice. So here, 50 hertz, 24 hertz, VRR, you get the 4K, true HDR10 with this, and then we have the auto HDR. So now that I've covered these specs, in-panel settings, my test results, and what you can do with consoles, let's get into what I like about this monitor. Starting with the main appeal, which is going to be the size paired with this higher resolution, because in person, this thing looks incredible. I could see if I went with the 45-inch version that they came out with last year and it was just 1440p, this would have a lot of pixelation, and I think I'd be pretty let down by that. Here, with this high resolution, everything looks clean, it looks crisp, it looks the way I think it should look for this size, because I don't want to get a monitor this big and then have a bunch of pixelation. Here you don't have that issue. So the size with this resolution is incredible, and then you get that 800R curve with this, and it is really amazing for gaming and editing. So specifically for editing, you get so much screen real estate. It just makes it so easy to work in Premiere Pro when I'm editing videos, because I have so much that I can actually utilize on screen where everything's not crammed in really tight. On top of that, I like to read my scripts, and I'll have them on one side of the screen and then I'll have Premiere Pro on the other. Here I'm not compromising anything, because sometimes that's really hard to work with. If you do this on a 27-inch monitor, for example, everything is crammed in there really tight. And so just size of the window that has my script pulled up, for example, is smaller. So it makes it harder to actually read that and then also simultaneously try to edit and work inside of Premiere Pro. This, no issue with this. There's so much that you can work with and fit on screen. It's incredible. So when it comes to workflow, this thing is top notch. Talking about gaming with this, I mentioned this earlier, but to just reiterate this point, if you're sitting somewhat close to it, it almost feels like you're in a VR headset, because there is so much screen in front of you and it is curved around you. So that may even lead to like feeling dizzy, kind of like you may with VR. I was playing Oblivion, and with that, I noticed as the character was moving, because it is kind of jarring, I was sitting pretty close and I was like, whoa, I'm starting to feel as if I'm moving too, much like a VR headset, and it started to make me just a little bit dizzy, so I had to back up just a little bit. And I don't think that is a negative thing by any means. I just think it's interesting that this is so large that it can mimic the sensation of a VR headset. In terms of overall performance with this is an OLED. It's incredibly fast. The colors are extremely vibrant here. You're getting all the same benefits of an OLED with this monitor that you would find with any other OLED. And in terms of ghosting, black smeared, inverse ghosting, you're just not going to find that here, because this is an OLED. The pixel response is just so incredibly fast. But for the higher resolution, you are capped at 165 hertz. So this isn't as high as what we're seeing start to become the norm, which seems like 240 hertz. You can do the dual 330 hertz mode. I'm going to talk about that again here in a little bit, because that did have some problems when Optimum Tech was testing that out. But at the 165 hertz, at the 5K by 2K, it does feel like a good sweet spot for most people being able to actually hit and achieve that with the 4000 or 5000 series GPUs. For those people out there that have like a 5090, they were lucky enough to get their hands on one, yeah, maybe then it would be like, all right, if you had this where it could go up to 240 hertz, maybe you could hit that with some games. Of course, that does depend on the settings that you're going to use, but I suspect even in most AAA games, you're not going to be consistently hitting that because of how large the resolution is here. Now, with all my reviews, I try to showcase a wide range of different gameplay footage so people can get a decent, well-rounded look at what this may be like when you're playing it in person. Of course, it will never be the same. Here I have noticed this is so large, it may get blurry in certain areas. That has to do with my camera and not the actual monitor, and it's just because it is so large. But for me, I will say this is probably fighting for that top spot in regards to overall fun when it comes to gaming. Because of the curve, the size, the resolution, playing first-person shooters, adventure games, just gaming in general feels so amazing on this thing. I'm wondering how hard it's going to be to actually transition back to a smaller monitor. Going from this back down to like a 27-inch monitor is just going to be a really hard adjustment. And at some point I will need to do that because I'm going to move on to another review. I definitely think this is going to be my main monitor for a long time, meaning even if I trade this out for another monitor so I can do the review, I will be coming back to this. This will be off to the side for a second, and then when I'm done with the review, I will be going right back to this one because I like it and enjoy it so much. So with this monitor, I think it's really geared towards workflow, obviously talking about Premiere Pro, but anything where you're needing a large amount of screen real estate to utilize the applications that you may be using. And then with gaming, it is more immersive. So for the adventure games, the role-playing games, I think this is really, really good for those. For first-person shooters, as long as you're not a competitive FPS player, this is a really good monitor for you as well. But if you're needing the highest refresh rate and that is giving you an advantage when playing that game, obviously this being capped at 165 Hertz, that's going to be an issue. And then I'm going to come back and talk about the dual 330 Hertz mode and the issues with that here in a second. I don't think this is really going to be the best monitor for you. Opting for a smaller one where it is more for esports and it's 400, 500, or even 600 Hertz is going to be the better route for you than this monitor. For HDR with this, I do think that this looks really good. The interesting thing here is you're not getting like a pure HDR mode that you're kind of forced into. What I like about the LG monitors is you get all the other adjustments that you would with any of the other picture presets. You're not boxed into, hey, this is an HDR gaming mode, a movie mode, or entertainment mode or anything like that, where they have these just different modes that you can't really adjust outside of, let's say, brightness. Here you get a lot of the controls still that you would with the normal picture presets, which I really like. And because of that, the HDR experience overall with this monitor is very good. Now, outside of performance and the picture quality and all of that, a handful of other things that I really like about this monitor. One is going to be the aesthetics, because they are very minimal and it's very sleek looking. There's not a lot going on with the molding. There's not a bunch of logos everywhere. Everything just looks really clean. And I like that with my setup because it doesn't look busy. Now, some people like that with their moldings, and that's fine. But here, I do like the fact that it is just overall more minimal. Something with that though is this isn't black. It's almost like a purplish gray or like dark gray. They don't have a white version like they have with some of their other monitors, but you have to be okay with that. So if it doesn't quite match the black look that you may be going with for your PC case and the components and your peripherals, this just isn't going to match that. So it kind of clashes a little bit. So it's almost like a trade-off. It's very minimal. I like that fact, but the coloring of the molding here isn't a pure black. So it does clash with my setup, at least a little bit, because I do have, for the most part, almost all black components. But outside of the coloring here, kudos to LG, because this thing is very sturdy. It's large enough that you have a little bit of a wobble with that. That's to be expected just because of how big it is. But in terms of the adjustments here, I do like the amount of height adjustment that they give you, along with the swivel and tilt, and just that little bit of pan with this that they don't list that spec, but it is there and it does allow you to get this in the perfect sweet spot for you. And that matters because of how large this screen is. Last two things here, the speakers are really good. They get really loud. So this is a set of speakers that you could use, and you don't need external ones, because I have the Logitech G560 speakers and those are incredible. But I actually, if I had this monitor and didn't have those speakers, I wouldn't need to get them. These get plenty loud. The sound is very rich. They are really, really good. Even more so with this though is the DTS audio with plugging in a headphone set. I think that is really good. I like the different profiles that you get. They do sound distinct with those. And in terms of like gaming, I actually almost prefer that over my Logitech G560 speakers and plugging a headset into there. I still get EQ settings that I can adjust with the Logitech software, but I think just like plug and play and the profiles that you get, I like the DTS audio with this over the Logitech. So now that I've covered what I like about this monitor, let's get into what I don't like. I have three things here. The first one, the OLED care features and panel adjustments compared to other monitors is lacking. And that's unfortunate because this is a newer monitor. I'm expecting to have more features when it comes to OLED care. And here, I'm not getting any outer dimming control. You're not getting any global dimming control, no taskbar detection. Like a lot of these features that you do find pretty standard with a lot of OLED monitors now, the newer ones, is just not here. I don't know why. I think it should be with this monitor because it's so large. You want more of those features so that you don't run into burn-in. Now, for most people, burn-in, that's way down the road. All the testing that I've seen where people just leave an OLED on, even after like 6 months to a year, it's just not quite there. And that's constant, hey, they are trying to burn an image into that screen. For most people, if you're doing the things that you need to do with an OLED, like I expect that you won't really see that until over 5 years. So that's doing your own taskbar hide feature through Windows, putting it into sleep mode or turning the monitor off or your PC off if you're not going to be there. It does have the sleep mode with this monitor. I can't quite figure out the timing on that because you don't have any control over that. You can't say, hey, if this has been sitting here with no activity for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15, just turn off the monitor. You have to do that through Windows. There's also no OLED anti-flicker mode here, and although I've only seen that like a couple times inside of some menus, which is pretty common with OLEDs, I've not really seen it beyond that, which is good. That feature though is just not here. It is gone. In terms of the other panel adjustments, you don't have the ability to change the color space, which I find interesting. And to clarify there, you have the picture presets or the game modes where you do have sRGB and then the DCI-P3. I mean, as it applies to every picture preset, you can't change the color space modes where you have a picture preset and then you want it to be in a wide gamut mode, DCI-P3 or sRGB. You do have that LG calibration software, which is awesome. And I've been able to hone this in to the look that I really want. But a lot of people aren't going to have one of those tools because they're expensive. So if you don't have that and you want more control, you just don't quite have it here. You have a decent amount of control. I'm not saying that. But I think for the price of this and it being a newer OLED, I'm just expecting a little bit more control in the panel menu than this is offering. And another example of that is you have no control over DSC, the display stream compression, from what I can find. There is no option in the menu where you can turn this on or off. I'm assuming if you do have the ability to utilize the DP 2.1, it will actually just turn that off. But I don't know that. I don't have a GPU that has DP 2.1, so I couldn't test this out. Are you going to notice the difference with that? That's where I go back and forth on that being an issue. I don't think anybody's really visually going to notice the difference. And that does allow you to do the 5K by 2K resolution at the 165 Hertz with HDR on, because I think even with the DP 2.1, I don't know if you would have the full uncompressed bandwidth to utilize all of that because the resolution is so big. I may be wrong on that part, but you just don't have control over that. Again, that may be an issue for some people. I don't think it's necessarily an issue because every monitor that I have used with DSC, I always leave it on, because if you turn it off, your resolution options and your refresh rate options go down because you won't have the amount of bandwidth you need to achieve those. So with some of the monitors, it's like, hey, this can do 4K 240 hertz with HDR, and then you turn off DSC and it's like, hey, you can do 4K at 120 hertz with HDR. You can't do the 240. So you actually limit your options, and utilizing it with DSC on or off, am I noticing the difference? No, but some people out there may be like, hey, I noticed the difference and it's important to me. With this, you just don't have that option at all, and I would prefer having more options than less. Last, this only comes with a 2-year warranty compared to what most companies offer, which is a 3-year warranty for burn-in. Considering the price here, I just don't think this should be 2 years. Offer the same warranty everybody else is offering, because part of what I'm paying for with this higher price tag is a little bit of the assurance that I have a good warranty that will cover me for any type of burn-in. Not that I think that will even happen within 3 years, but I want that safety net just in case. I'm going to be very upset if it's just a little over 2 years and all of a sudden something does happen with the panel, and for whatever reason I do get burn-in and I'm not covered. But if I went with another monitor, I would have been. I don't like that. So that is going to be it for the negatives. Let's get into the gray area here. These are things you may or may not care about. I'm going to start with the fact that this doesn't have a KVM switch. Considering the price, I think it should. And also the USB extension ports here work weird. There's not that typical port that you would find on a monitor that allows for USB extension. What you're getting is a dual functioning USB type C port, where you could plug this in and use it as a display input, or if it's plugged into your computer, you can use it for data transfer, where it will then allow you to connect anything to the 2 USB ports on this, and then you can connect anything you want to those and utilize it through your PC via the monitor and that USB Type-C cable. It's a weird roundabout way that you do this. I think they should have just had the extension port on this that you normally find, and then left the USB Type-C alone, and then added the KVM switch in here, because this is pretty expensive. I think with that, you should get a lot of these extras, and here we just don't have it. Now, why is this a gray area thing? Because not everybody cares about a KVM switch, and some people may not even use the extension ports on the monitor or even care that they're there. But for some people, they may. So this is where it's like, for some people, it's a big deal. For other people, it won't be at all. Last here, the dual 330 hertz mode. Most likely this has an accuracy problem from what I've seen with what Optimum Tech highlighted and showcased. Again, I will have a link so you guys can watch that. It's really insightful. He has the testing tools and the means to actually showcase that, where I do not. And it just seems like this is very inaccurate. And because of that, if you are a competitive FPS gamer, I don't think this is really going to be the best option for you, because for some people they may be like, hey, and this would be the example of Optimum Tech. He likes the big screen because he can edit his videos, but he does play these highly competitive FPS games, and so he wants that edge. And then using the dual mode, he's like, I'm missing my targets. This isn't accurate. He tested it out. He showed it is very inaccurate. And so with that, if you were hoping that this would be the good fit that you're looking for, where you can do certain things with the larger screen and then switch it over, unfortunately, I just don't think this is going to be a good monitor for you to get because of this accuracy problem. So that's going to wrap it up for the gray area. 2 last things that I want to cover. Consoles. You can have the stretched out image, or you can have the black bars. You could scale this down even more if you wanted to the smaller screen sizes that this offers. That's fine. I wouldn't get this, obviously, if I just play on consoles. It's way overpriced just to play on a console, and then the limitations that you're going to run into anyways is just not going to be right for you. If you're playing PC and then you happen to use a console, I think this thing is great because you still can utilize that and you have plenty of options that will allow you to use it in the way that you see fit. For text clarity, this thing having the higher resolution, I think text clarity on this thing is really, really good. I'm not seeing any text fringing, and pixelation is very minimal with this also. Overall, this is really, really good when it comes to the text, and that matters because one of the things that I keep coming back to is how good this is for certain applications like Adobe Premiere Pro. There's a lot of text on screen with that. I don't want to have text fringing, and I don't want a bunch of pixelation when it comes to the text, because then that just makes everything feel more fatiguing for my eyes because of just how weird it looks. This is very crisp, clear, easy to use, and I think it's one of the main draws, obviously, because I've mentioned this multiple times. When I'm working inside of one of these apps and I have all of this extra screen real estate, there's just more that I can do than if everything was crammed into a smaller space. Last thing I do want to touch on here is the price. Didn't talk about that in the spec section. This is obviously very expensive. It is $2,000. I did see this on sale for $1,600, so $400 off. I think at that price point, this is a very good deal for what you're getting here. If you're not willing to wait, though, the $2,000, obviously that is a premium price tag. I don't like telling people what to do with their money. It's whether or not this is worth it for you. I think here in the next 6 to 9 months, we will see this slide down, especially as we come up on the holiday season later this year, and we will see the $1,600 price tag probably stick around more, and it may settle into that. So you may want to wait. If you can't, then again, this is going to be $2,000, and that is before tax or anything like that. So it's more realistically like $2,100 to $2,200. So that is going to wrap this video up. This is a premium monitor with a premium price tag, and I really like this thing for the application space and then the games that I play. And so if you are in that same boat, then I think you will really enjoy this monitor. This obviously has some caveats that I talked about. So if you are more of a competitive FPS player, probably not going to want to get this. If there are any questions that you have on this monitor where I didn't answer it in this review, let me know in the comment section. I will make sure to answer that for you there. I will have a link for this in the description if you want to pick it up. Definitely check back frequently for sales. And that is going to be it for this one. If you liked the video, hit the like button for me as it helps the channel out. If you want to continue to follow along with all my content, hit the subscribe button for me. And as always, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.